Council President, we're ready.
Good. Council agenda, Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, regular Township Council meeting of August 21st, 2018.
Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided in accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meetings Law by filing the notice in the office of the Township Clerk and by posting the meeting notice on the bulletin board at the municipal building and on the municipal website on December 20th, 2017, where it has remained posted since that date. A legal notice appeared in the Daily Record and the Newark Star Ledger on December 27, 2017, and was forwarded by fax to other local newspapers on December 20th, 2017. Council meetings are videotaped and aired on Public Access Channel 21 at 7 p.m. Sundays and Wednesdays, and are also available for viewing at www.parsippany.net.
Please rise for the flag salute. Ms. Peterson, if you would.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could ask you to just remain standing for a minute and have a moment of silence for Peggy Mader, who was a longtime township employee. She was the secretary of our planning board. She just passed away. Thank you. Roll call.
Mr. DiPiero,
Here.
Ms. Grignani,
Present.
Ms. McCarthy,
Here.
Ms. Peterson,
Here.
Mr. Carriffy.
Here.
Also in attendance are Business Administrator Alan Sandman, CFO Ann Cucci, Township Attorney Jim Lott, Township Clerk Colette Madden, Council President. We have a quorum. You may begin.
Thank you. Upcoming meetings, September 11th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m., agenda meeting, and September 25th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m., regular meeting. Approval of minutes, presentations, reports. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Council President. I have to have words with your clerk. Thank you, Mr. Council President. Good evening, Parsippany. There are some things that transcend politics. Not everything needs to be left and right and red and blue. And one of those things is service. And especially in this case, service to this town and service to this country. And I don't care what political leanings you have when it comes to that. That's something you have to respect. With that said, I would like to call down from the podium Councilman Michael J. DiPiero and his wife Dee DiPiero to come on up, please.
That's the first time you heard that, right?
I'd like to read this proclamation into the record. Whereas the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills honors Michael J. DiPiero as an extraordinary example of a man who dedicated his life to public service in his town, state, and country. Whereas we recognize his extensive involvement within the community since his arrival to Parsippany in 1965. Whereas the residents of Parsippany elected Michael J. DiPiero to the Township Council for four-year terms, that's 1982 to 97, and he returned to the council in August 2000 and is now serving his 9th four-year term. I'll repeat that, 9th four-year term. Whereas he has been a member of the Township Planning Board, Open Space Committee, and the Knoll Country Club Advisory Committee, and many others throughout his tenure. Whereas we commend his service in the Air Force during Vietnam, as well as his involvement as a member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars, Post 10184, and the American Legion, Post 249. Now, therefore, I, Michael Soriano, Mayor of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, do hereby dedicate the Knoll Country Club driving range in honor of Councilman DiPiero, and hereby proclaim the new name to be the Michael J. DiPietro Driving Range, dated this date, August 21st, 2018. Congratulations. I would also like everyone to know that this Saturday, we're going to have a dedication ceremony at the Knoll Driving Range, 2 o'clock, Saturday, 2 o'clock, at the Knoll Driving Range, where we will do the unveiling. Michael, would you like to say a couple of words, Councilman? Please.
Mayor, I'd like to thank you for this honor. I really, really appreciate it. I go back almost 50 years with the Knoll Country Club. A lot of you may not be aware, Bloomfield College used to own the Knoll Country Club. And back in the 1970s, the early 1970s, they were declaring bankruptcy and the Knoll was going out for bid. But first, some contractors wanted to save Bloomfield College, and so they wanted to build a new college for them at the Knoll Country Club. But first they had to build some 8-story high-rises to fund the college. So they wanted the township to change the zoning at the Knoll Country Club so they can build their high-rises. That's when I got involved in politics. That was around 1970. We formed a group called COCAP, Combined Organizations Concerned About Parsippany. Ed O'Mara, Harold O'Neill, Terry Vieira, David Shin and his wife Marilyn. We had civic leaders from all the different organizations in town. Usually we met at my house. And we formed 3 groups. The first group were the environmentalists. And if you remember back in those days, lower Lake Hiawatha used to flood every time it rained. And we would be taking some of those homes out, about 60 homes out, in rowboats. Not hurricanes, not Irene or Sandy, regular rain. So the environmentalists got the charts from the Army Corps of Engineers, and they calculated if you blacktop 341 acres of grass and trees, how many more trillion gallons would flow into the Rockaway River, and how many more homes would flood in lower Lake Hiawatha. Their calculations said we would have 460 homes underwater in lower Lake Hiawatha if we allowed them to do this. When we had the flood with Irene, 480 homes were damaged by the flood. So those calculations were pretty darn close, and that was 40 years earlier. So we petitioned the township not to change the zoning, and they didn't. And then Henry Luther was Governor Burns' campaign manager, and Governor Byrne was pushing for the first New Jersey State Green Acres bond. So we went to Henry, said, tell the governor we'll support the bond throughout Morris County if he promises that Green Acres will help fund the Knoll Country Club because we're going to buy it. That deal was made. And then Jack Fahey was the mayor then. And Jack Fahey says, I don't care who bids on it, we're going to condemn it and take it away, eminent domain. And that was the way Jack dealt with things. And nobody else bid, so we got it for $5.5 million, well, 341 acres. And Green Acres paid $2.8 million of that. Best deal in New Jersey. Now, I've been involved in it ever since. I've been a member for 43 years. I've pushed for improvements for all these years. About 18 years I've been pushing for this driving range to come back, and that's something I'm really happy with. Also, when they banned smoking indoors, a lot of our golfers would, after they finished their round of golf, grab their drinks and their cigars and go stand out on the front steps because they couldn't smoke inside anymore. So through 3 mayors, I was trying to get them to build a deck in the back because people coming in with weddings and taking pictures, and you got these guys in the background with cigars and drinks. You know, it didn't make for good photographs out on the front steps. I was getting the complaints. So I kept saying we need to put those guys, including me, in the back on the deck, and finally we got that too. So it's a labor of love for me with the Knoll. I've been on the advisory board all these years, and Mayor, thank you very much.
Okay. I'd like to call up the Reese family and the supporters here. Please, everyone. Everyone wearing yellow. Gold, right. Gold, come on up over here. Okay. Okay, all right, well, we'll do that soon, okay? Okay, let me read this other proclamation into the record. Childhood cancer is the leading disease-related cause of death among children in the United States, killing more children than asthma, diabetes, cystic fibrosis, congenital anomalies, and pediatric AIDS combined. Whereas it is estimated that 43 children per day, or 15,695 children annually, will be diagnosed with cancer in the United States, with the average age of diagnosis just 6 years old. Whereas 1 out of 5 children diagnosed with cancer will not survive the disease. Whereas 2/3 of childhood cancer patients will also suffer from long-term effects of comprehensive treatment, including treatment-induced secondary cancers, lung and heart damage, infertility, and cognitive impairment. Whereas childhood cancer research is vastly underfunded, with less than 4% of federal government cancer research funding going to study pediatric cancer. Whereas too many children are affected by this deadly disease, and more must be done to raise awareness and find a cure. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim that I declare the month of September to be Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. I encourage all citizens to support this cause that so deeply impacts families in our communities and across this country. So just a reminder, September will be Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, and the key color to wear is gold. Okay. Thank you very much, and I'd like to present this to the family. Mr. Council President, that concludes my report.
Thank you. Township Council?
I have several items for closed session tonight, Mr. President.
Business Administrator?
I just have one report, an update. You did get it in your packages. And we talked about how there are so many things that you can take the opportunity to investigate. And one of the ones was gov deals. And Saf, who was the intern and someone who's become a big part of making things happen in Parsippany. We talked last time about maybe $50,000-$60,000 of monies received from old vehicles and pieces of material that were no longer needed by the town. Well, I'm here to say that that has grown to the possibility, if we do, all the people that have bid and do put in for the money, we're talking about $172,852, and I always say add the cents because it sounds like a real number, and 96 cents. So, I mean, that is telling. There were 5 different locations throughout the town because of our size. We have, a town hall, we have public works, we have the water and sewer utilities. So it not only helped us raise the funds, they come and pick it up, we receive all that money. As of today, we've received in cash in excess of $110,000, and a majority of people have picked up. So if all goes well, there's a very good chance we'll hit about $170,000 of money coming in, and also, cleaning up the areas to provide for better service to our public. So these are the things that you try to uncover and do. And SAF, of course, and I did not do it alone. We had many people from Public Works and the sewer and water utilities work with us in conjunction in taking the pictures of the items and answering questions. So, and finding the titles for the vehicles, was the majority of what was vehicles, but we did. And so that's good news. money coming in the right direction. Thanks, and thanks to our intern. Thank you, Mary, for providing him to us by saying, come to a council meeting, and look what happened. Oh, and tomorrow he will be 21.
Township Clerk?
Just one thing real quick, Council President. Today, we had another shredded day for our archives, and as you guys know, we have an archive here, and one of the reasons that I was hired was to take care of the archive room, and up until this point, I think we've destroyed about 1,500 boxes, and we're in the process of really cleaning the entire room out. I mean, and it's no easy feat. If you've ever seen the archive room, more than welcome to show any resident if they'd like. Just come to my office and I can give you a tour of the archives. But it's a really big room and it's no easy feat, and we're working on it. And the goal is to eventually rid the room of all documents except only permanent documents, as we're going to be going into scanning, and I'll have a more thorough report to you guys next meeting about the scanning. But that's where we're at now. Thank you, Council President.
Thank you. Township offices, committees, reports?
Just one item, if I may. On North Beverick Road, as you come up from Route 46, right after Bank of America, there's a vacant house, and there's an occupied house right next to it that are terrible eyesores as an entrance to this end of Parsippany and Lake Hiawatha. I bring this up every so often because the banks that own that vacant house, unless we subpoena them or do something with them, they do not maintain that property, and it's an eyesore in our town. I'd like that to be enforced. We have ordinances to force them to do the right thing.
Do you have the addresses on these?
You can't miss it. Just go up North Beverick Road. You'll know which ones I'm talking about.
All right. Because we are working on a myriad.
All the nods out here, everybody out here knows the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're working on it.
Thank you.
Yeah. We will have a report at the next meeting on these. And maybe you won't need the report because you'll see the improvement.
Okay, thank
Okay?
you.
It's a promise.
Ellen, I also have a
Okay.
address I want to give you.
Yes.
If we could look
Okay.
into that.
Yeah,
Similar
absolutely.
situation to
Okay.
to this.
Very good. Thank you, Council President.
Okay, bids taken, July 31st, 2018, road reconstruction project, Mount Tabor. To be taken, August 23rd, 2018, replacement of lamps at Knoll Tennis Club, Parsippany Community Center. Quotations, proposals, qualifications, none? Mrs. Peterson?
Closed session. Resolution, whereas the Public Open Meetings Act, PL 1975, Chapter 231 permits the exclusion of the public from a meeting in certain circumstances, and whereas the Township Council is of the opinion that such circumstances presently exist, and whereas the Township Council wishes to discuss 1, pending litigation and attorney-client privileged matters, Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, Mount Laurel 3, declaratory judgment requesting court approval of an amended municipal affordable housing trust fund spending plan and status of litigation. 2, contract negotiations, amendment of the shared services agreement with the Parsippany Troy Hills Board of Education for the deployment of Class 3 special law enforcement officers. And 3, attorney-client privileged matter, R 2018-151, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, finding and declaring an emergency for the purpose of NJSA 40:69A-181, and authorizing the immediate enactment of ordinance 2018:15. And whereas minutes will be kept, and once the matter involving the confidentiality of the above no longer requires confidentiality, the minutes can be made public. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills that the public be excluded from this meeting. Motion to adjourn into closed session.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Roll call. So, Mr. DePiero.
Okay, before you take the roll, I just want to make sure. We're having a closed session now instead of at the end of the meeting because we may have to vote on something after the closed session.
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted the public to be aware. of
Yes, we will be
why we're doing it
taking,
now.
yes, we will be taking action after this closed session on at least one matter. With that being said, I will go ahead and take roll now. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
We'll be adjourning in closed session. I'll be back shortly. Thank you.
Good help.
Are back on the record.
Motion to reconvene?
Second, Grignani.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Mrs. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
We are back into public session.
Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to open up the public hearing.
Motion?
Second.
Okay, so the motion was made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
The floor is open to the public on any matter.
Okay, if you do come forward, please state your name and address. You'll be given 5 minutes.
Mr.
Please.
Piccarello, if you could just speak into the mic.
Microphone, Frank.
And also, when you're done, you can sign it.
17 Stafford Road. I have this problem, and I have an easement in the back of my yard, and it floods like forever. And my neighbors down the street, it's from my yard, it goes out to the road, then it goes back to the other yards. Three houses down, it's been clogged solid. Engineering's been there a few times, and they can't get this unclogged. They can't solve this problem. Our pools are getting ruined. I put 3-4 liners in already, and my yard is a mess. My neighbor, his pool turned to mud last week with the flooding. And, I don't think engineering has the equipment to open up that line that's clogged, or have to see that something has to be done to put a new line in there, new pipe or something. But it's been going on forever. And why, we're getting that flooding. I don't understand why the yards, every time it rains, they just back up and our yards just keep getting a swamp. It's
What's
a
your
mess.
address, sir?
I need the address.
Address.
17 Stafford, but
Stafford, okay.
it
If
goes
I'm-
down to like the 3 neighbors down.
If I may.
Mine, engineering came in and put a new grade in my yard, and mine goes out to the street, it's fine. But going to the backyards of the other 3 houses, it's a mess. It don't go anywhere.
If I may interject, one of those houses happens to be my brother, Dan DeLeo. He is at 11 Stafford
11.
Road. He has a pool, and this has been a flood problem for several years, not
It's
just this
yeah, it's
past
not- It's,
time. I
I
have
lo- I
called
lost the
engineering.
basement.
I have called engineering. I have spoken to Justin Lisa, and he tells me that they are aware of the problem, but they don't know where the blockage is. If the equipment, I said to him, if the equipment that the township has is not capable of taking care of this problem, then we should hire a company that does have the proper equipment to go to the different yards. Now, the problem is also, as Justin has told me, and I understand this perfectly, everyone has a fence because they have pools, so they can't go onto the property. I also said to him, perhaps you can go to the property in the back, ask permission to go to their property so you can get to these different homes. And he said that's very difficult to do. But he said he's trying to talk to the state
because this line goes out to Route 46 where ShopRite and Home Depot is. And it also goes out to Vale Road. And I said to him, forget about the state, these are residents, and we have to help them. Thank you, Frank, for coming before.
Since the condos were built on 46.
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
I never had a problem before. I'm here 40-something years in my house. I lost a basement. This is my third or fourth liner now. Liner's all wrinkled. It's all behind the liner. You know, just every time you walk in, it's like a sponge.
Yeah, there's a huge tunnel that goes under Route 46 from that wetlands area. When Hovnanian built that townhouse complex, it took them 6 months to get permission from the state of New Jersey to clean out the state's tunnel for them. I would suspect that tunnel should be cleaned every year. It's a state responsibility. And I think we need to reach out to the state first, because if that tunnel fills up with silt, then the water can't flow through. It backs up into that wetlands area, which then backs up into all the drain pipes that come into there.
It's been a problem.
What I will do, tomorrow, I will be meeting with Justin, and oftentimes when there's a situation like this, I don't meet with him or call him. I go down to the office and we sit and we work it out. I think we'll do a pincer movement here. We'll deal with the state as well as at the same time dealing with the local. And if we don't have the proper equipment, there's tons of companies that we can get the proper equipment up. And sometimes, you know, in deference to Justin, he does a fabulous job. It's a
Yes.
big town and a lot of things. And I know you're not saying that, but what I'm saying is sometimes they should reach out to administration and say, this is, you know, so-called above my pay grade or above my, and come and we can work it out. So we're on the case, and that's not lip service. You will
Okay.
get action.
I appreciate it.
Thank
Ellen,
you
would
for
that,
coming before us.
the equipment that he was saying that Justin said we don't have, would possibly the county have that
Yeah,
equipment?
that's what I'm saying. First, that's
Maybe
what
we
I
could
would
go
go
to
to.
the county
Yeah, go
and
to
ask
the
them.
county.
Okay.
We have great relationships with them and their
Sure.
public works
Yeah.
people, yeah.
Well, Justin has a giant rotor-rooter that can go about 200 feet. But to clean out the pipe, if there's roots in there,
Right, could be-
you have to go even longer than that to get from one manhole to the next.
Right.
We'll,
I think he said his equipment can't go that far.
yeah, yeah.
That's what I just said.
Yeah, that's right. But the county does have amazing equipment, you know,
Yeah,
as you
so
well
maybe we
know.
can get theirs.
Yeah. They've borrowed our tub grinder, so we'll borrow
There
theirs.
you go.
Yeah, they have.
Mary Przicki, Marcella Road in Parsippany. Two things. One, the area of Route 4 of Littleton Road and Cherry Hill Road, I know was discussed about 4 meetings ago, especially with the traffic problems that we're having. And I did have people come to my house and ask what could be done. Because it is getting worse. I mean, especially since that if, like I said, if Tevia comes moving in, and then you've got the UPS, I think if they're coming in, the town should get a hold of the DOT, and they should be responsible too for some kind of upgrade in that area. Right now, that ground by Littleton Road was used as a field office area when they were redoing the interchange by 287. They guaranteed that would have been put back environmentally back to what it was, that it had trees and woods, and we had, you know, deer and things like that there. And we got a hold of Representative Panaccio, and we got I think Weber too, and yes, they got together with the town and they were going to put it back. Well, they put it back, but they didn't put it all back. And right now, if you look, all construction vehicles are there. There are now night lights set up there. And I was wondering if the town is aware of what kind of activity is going on up there and what the DOT is doing next. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be a construction yard. And that's what it's turned into again. And then the other concern is, with all the rain, I wonder if any of you have passed Waterview development. And I had asked couple of times if there were going to be sidewalks there and whether the sidewalks were planned. In the beginning, I thought they were. And right now, that wall, the erosion that's coming from that wall down towards Route 46 is amazing. I mean, I can't see how structurally it's going to last. I don't know if any of you were aware of it. I went to the planning board and I wanted to see the plans, but you can't get them because they're out for microfiche, to see that are there supposed to be sidewalks there, and if there is, somebody sure put that wall in the wrong area. And today, it almost looks like they're redoing part of that wall. There's the man who would know about the sidewalks, I think, maybe. And, you know, before it gets worse and before it's done, somebody should go there and say, hey, look, is this being done properly and in accordance with what the planning board had specifically designed? So I think it's important. It really looks awful the way it is now, and somebody should take a look at it. But that area of town is just always constantly being built, and we're the ones subject to the traffic, and and you should protect the citizens who are walking on Route 46, but you don't. Now, can you talk about wildlife now?
No, that
or
will be it's
the
coming up. So as soon as it comes up in the ordinance for the public hearing, and that's
Well,
just
this
for
is the
everybody.
open session, so she can talk about anything right now.
No, she should really reserve it for the public
the
hearing.
public-
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And
Thank
that's
you.
for everybody that has an issue with regards to RCW. It is coming up in the public hearing, so this way, for interest of expediting the entire meeting, we'll just wait until that comes up. Yeah, you are correct, Councilman DePiero, but there's just so much on. So in the interest of time, we've already held them up about an hour, so.
Nicholas Homiak from Lake Hiawatha. I'm just here just to remark, I've showed you this picture before. Parsippany and Morris County in general, we're not enforcing the mandatory recycle laws, and especially with business franchises. This picture was taken in Ringwood. This is what Parsippany, any mall or a business should look like. A person selling point of origin items that will either turn into litter or recycle. I understand that Councilwoman McCarthy wants to start a plastic ban. The convenience culture of plastic and the free market laissez-faire over-engineered products are destroying, they have destroyed culture, and they're destroying the environment. And we have to, this town and all towns, we have to do something about what's happening. You can't find a place anywhere. Our infrastructure, our streets, our sewers are nothing but avenues of pollution. These pipes and everything, they're clogged with dirt, they're clogged with grass, they're clogged with plastic. No one cleans the street. Supposedly the street cleaner comes on North Beverwick on a Friday. Well, whether they are or not, I doubt whether they're being effective. I took a walk up there on a Sunday after the Friday, and I do frequent that area if I go to the bank or Food Town, and sometimes I pick stuff up and sometimes I don't. But if they cleaned up Friday, they left an awful lot of stuff that wasn't cleaned up. So I don't know if it was, because of a parked car, or they're just not doing a job right. My opinion, as a race of people, the American people, we've forgotten how to be clean. But the main question, are we, or can we, is it a hopeless case, enforce our own ordinances, sanitation ordinances? The recycle has actually become a part of the problem, especially with the plastic again. People leave it out, the wind will knock it over, and for some bizarre reason, once it hits the street, it doesn't belong to the homeowner anymore. It doesn't belong to the neighborhood. It doesn't belong to the community. It belongs to "In God We Trust," I guess. And then it goes down that pipe, and go down the Detroit Brook or Forge Pond or any of those places. That's all you see with the water. It takes it. It's in the oceans. It's everywhere. But we have to start doing something, and this plastic ban is a good idea, but it's only a touch of the iceberg. There has to be some mass political movement to start outlawing all of this convenience. Now, Mr. DiPiero says the house over there on North Beverwick, and I know what house he's talking about. See, but I'm the kind of guy, when I pass it up, oh, that's an old house and the grass is growing. The grass doesn't hurt anybody. But take a look. Take a look at that area and take a look, and you'll see plastic all over the place. That's a much more important issue for us to be concerned with or to be disturbed about than an old house where the grass is growing. So I would like an answer, though. Is it a lost cause?
1 minute, Nick.
Is it a lost cause in Parsippany or in Morris County, anywhere, to start making these people, these responsible for, the recycle, to try to stymie some of this cumulative effect that's all going to landfills, streets, and gutters? That's the only thing I'm interested in. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nick raised a question that it kind of makes sense. Those recyclable bins, whose responsibility would, let's say North Beverwick Road, should we require the shop owners to have something like that out there, or is that a township responsibility? We should, if we want to keep Lake Hiawatha neat, we should purchase those and pick them up, recycling bins? Question for the administration for the future.
One of the things, as you may or not be aware of, one of the visions that the mayor has been working on in the last couple of months is North Beverwick and dealing with that in a unified method. And one of the things certainly would be the recycling canisters as well as the trash, the double thing, and to work in concert with the shop owners as well as the town, and looking and seeking, and we are seeking grants to do that. So yes, it is being addressed, and it just does take time, but there's been a concerted effort. We've had 2 major meetings. We've brought in some stakeholders also, and there has been quite a bit of headway, and I guess the next meeting will have a lot more, and I think maybe, as the mayor is here, I would just suggest that maybe a report of our third meeting, after our third meeting, to say all the other elements that have been done. I don't know if you've gone by, one in particular is zoning, and has been working to remove the signage from, so I don't know if you've noticed some of that, which has been a tremendous positive effect with the area, and well as even you had spoken about. There was a rodent condition too that was brought up at that meeting and then addressed immediately, and so we're bringing all our department heads together, not just on the recycling aspect and the trash removal, but to make that be what it should be and is. The center of town, a center to be proud of. And Nick, we're going to work on that. And I will be, maybe before I leave, I'm going to get you that what you want, which is the barrel with the brush. And you said you would do that. So, and we'll put a name on it. Nick Homiak will write on that. I think we can afford to get that.
Thank you.
So Ellen, how about the enforcement of those? I mean, do we have a record of what happens to these store owners? And there is a lot of debris outside of some of these.
Well,
consumers.
Nick does bring that up often, and yes, we actually hired, as you well know, Chad is our recycling coordinator and is working with it, and he does work under Greg Schneider, who is the enforcement arm, and they have done some improvements, but it's like the whack-a-mole thing where you push
Well,
down on
are
one
there
area and it
fines?
pops up,
Are there fines?
There are fines. We've
Have
tried
they?
to get
Have they
compliance.
fined?
At this point, I would say they've been very limited, if any, fines.
So,
I will
mean,
say that.
Is that something that?
That we should look into and say, we'd love to get compliance without trying to do fines, but there comes a point where how many warnings can you give? And I think it's time. It's time.
Yeah, I mean, there should
Yeah.
only be so many
Yes,
warnings before they're
absolutely.
fined.
I will have a discussion, and again, I think this will be something that, I'm pretty sure by September, we have had a plan to have another meeting on this. And, this will be a topic, but prior to that, we'll have some, input back from, Greg and Chad on, what they've been doing till we have the meeting
Yeah,
about
look-
enforcement.
In looking at this subject, I mean, there's a cost to that too, with the plastic bags going through the sewer system and whatnot. I mean, there is
There is. There's
It
always
is, yeah.
a cause and effect.
Okay, thank you. See no one else come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion?
Second, Grignani.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
yes.
Ms. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
Floor is closed.
Mr. DePiero?
Before I read ordinance 2018:17, I need a correction on the appropriation of $13,360,000. And then what's that four-digit number after it?
067 it should have been.
067? Okay.
Just a very quick note for these next few ordinances, they're bond ordinances, so they're going to require 4 votes and not 3 votes, just for the record.
Bond ordinance 2018:17, bond ordinance providing for various capital improvements in and by the township of Parsippany Troy Hills and the county of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $13,360,067, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $12,692,064 bonds or notes of the township to finance part of the cost thereof. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on first reading at a meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills held on August 21st, 2018, and that said ordinance be further considered for a second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on September 11th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached at the municipal building in said township, at which time all persons interested shall be given an opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second, Grignani.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero,
Yes.
Ms. Grignani,
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy,
Yes.
Ms. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Ordinance 2018:18, bond ordinance providing for various improvements to the water utility in and by the township of Parsippany Troy Hills in the county of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $2,925,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $2,725,000 in bonds or notes of the township to finance part of the cost thereof. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on the first reading at a meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills held on August 21st, 2018, and that said ordinance be further considered for second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on September 11th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached at the municipal building in said township, at which time all persons interested shall be given the opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mrs. Peterson?
Ordinance 2018-19, bond ordinance providing for the various improvements to the Knoll utility in and by the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $253,000, therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $253,000 bonds or notes of the township to finance the cost thereof. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on first reading at a meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills held on August 21st, 2018, and that said ordinance be further considered for second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on September 11th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached at the municipal building in said township, at which time all persons interested shall be given an opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mrs. Grignani?
Ordinance 2018:20, bond ordinance providing for the acquisition of a sewer jet vacuum truck for the sewer utility in and by the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey, appropriating $500,000 therefore, and authorizing the issuance of $500,000 bonds or notes of the township to finance the cost thereof. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on the first reading at the meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills held on August 21st, 2018, and that said ordinance be further considered for second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on September the 11th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached at the municipal building in the said township, at which time all persons interested shall be given an opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mr. DePiero?
Ordinance 2018:21, an ordinance appropriating $515,000 from the Sewer Utility Capital Improvements Fund for the acquisition of vehicles and the replacement of water meters in and by the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills in the County of Morris, New Jersey. Be it resolved that the above ordinance be introduced, read by title, and passed on first reading at a meeting of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills held on August 21st, 2018, and that said ordinance be considered for second reading and final passage at a meeting to be held on September 11th, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. prevailing time, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be reached at the municipal building in said township, at which time all persons interested shall be given an opportunity to be heard concerning said ordinance. Be it further resolved that the clerk be authorized and directed to advertise said ordinance with the notice of introduction thereof being published in the official newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. DePiero.
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Mrs. McCarthy?
Ordinance 2018:12, an ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, Morris County, New Jersey, amending and supplementing Chapter 430 zoning related to permitted accessory uses and structures in the RCW Recreation, Conservation, and Wildlife District. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, on June 22nd, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the June 19th, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept that ordinance 2018:12 be heard in its second and final reading.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2018:12.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay, the floor is now open to anyone who would like to speak about this ordinance only that has to do with the rezoning with regards to the RCW, just so.
We should do the presentation.
Yeah, I think, Council President, if I may?
Yes.
I think that before we entertain public comment on the ordinance, I'd like to call Ms. Favati, the Township Planner. Welcome her to the governing body meeting tonight. She is going to substitute for Mr. Banish, who unfortunately had a conflict. But at request of council last meeting, we were asked to develop some mapping materials that Mr. Banish did provide us. And why don't we see if we can dim the lights for a moment, and we can go ahead and take a look at some of the mapping material and have Ms. Favati explain what the maps depict.
Just while we warm up, and hopefully it works. It worked a couple hours ago. There we go.
Do you have enough lighting to see?
I have plenty of light, yes.
Okay. I just wanna make sure.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you to the public for being patient. As Mr. Lott mentioned, I am sort of pinch hitting tonight for your planner, Frank Banish, who has been working with the township for some years, I believe, on this matter. But I have spoken with Mr. Banish and with Mr. Lott. I watched the tape from your meeting a couple weeks ago, so I feel ready. We actually did discuss this at a planning board meeting recently where the planning board made a determination of consistency with the master plan. So I have familiarity with this proposal. And one thing that struck me when I was watching the tape from a couple weeks ago was that there seemed to be some confusion kind of about what this is all about, what does it mean for me. I think some frustration I sensed. So I thought maybe it was good to take a step back and to kind of go through a little bit step by step, and I'll try to be brief.
Can you hear in the back?
Can you hear?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, because
Maybe I'll-
the mic.
Why don't you hold it? You can talk better.
I'll hold it. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Good, thank you.
So I'm going to try to just go through a little bit, step by step, without taking too much time, kind of about why we're here, what is this all about, and what does it really mean for particularly the neighboring property owners. So what this is really about, as Mr. Lott, your township attorney, mentioned last time, this is all about a settlement of a litigation, which I'm not going to get into, but it's been some years in the making. And so this is a zoning change, an amendment to an existing zoning district, the RCW, the Recreation, Conservation, and Wildlife District, which is part of that legal settlement between the township and wildlife preserves. It's not a development application. There is no specific development on the table here. No proposal for any building or structure in this zone. So what this really is just revising some of the provisions that govern accessory uses in the RCW district. And another thing to note is that it's not changing in any way the boundary of the RCW district. That will remain intact. It's really just what kind of activities can occur within that district. So in terms of where the RCW zone is, I mean, I think most people are most familiar with it in terms of the Troy Meadows area of the township. That's not the only place that it is found in the township. It is the most significant land area that the RCW is located. There are various other locations within Parsippany Troy Hills that are zoned RCW. Many of them are owned by the township itself. Some are owned by homeowner associations or other nonprofits or the state or county. But really the crux of this matter is the Troy Meadows area because, and for reasons I'll get into in a minute, that is the only area that is affected by this particular zoning change. So a lot of notices went out. A lot of people were notified because their property abuts an RCW zone, but they probably, unless they're next to the Troy Meadows, they may not be affected. I think there was an exercise of caution in fulfilling the requirements of the MLUL and notification. It was a hefty lift, I know, on notifying all those property owners, but it's because the RCW does exist elsewhere in the township. So what is being proposed? What is before the council tonight? Really, it's just some changes to the classification and a little bit more detail on the permitted accessory uses within this zone. As I think most people know, this zone is all about conservation of land. So there are very few principal permitted uses in the RCW zone. It's basically agricultural and recreation-related uses, and that's it. No residential uses, no commercial uses unless they're recreational in nature are permitted now in the zone, and that will not change. What is changing is that the zoning is proposed to be more explicit about the types of accessory uses that are allowed. Right now, it just says anything incidental to the principal permitted use. Doesn't give an example of what that is, doesn't give any kind of parameters for that in terms of location, size. It leaves it pretty open. So what this zoning change would do would basically call out 4 specific accessory uses that would be permitted. 1 environmental education center, 1 maintenance garage, 1 ranger relief station, and an unspecified number of nature observatory structures, so like bird watching structures, for example. So as I mentioned earlier, there's currently no residential use allowed in this zone, and that will not change. There will continue to be no residential uses allowed. And except for commercial recreation uses, no other types of commercial uses will be allowed, as currently is the case. There are a number of controls that are also proposed on these accessory uses, which really get at controlling the location and the scale of potential development of these accessory uses, really by 3 main factors. The first is size. So each of these types of accessory uses is limited in terms of its building coverage. For an environmental education center, it's 4,000 square feet. For the maintenance garage, it's 1,000 square feet. And for the ranger relief station, it's 850 square feet. There's also a limitation on where these things can be. There are buffers established of 150 feet from any residential zone, the lot line of any residential zone. So any structure, any of these accessory structures would have to be located at least 150 feet away from that residential zone. And it's worth noting that that's one of the most restrictive, if not the most restrictive, setback requirements in all of the township of Parsippany Troy Hills. We looked today and we found there's one of your office zones, the SED5 zone, that has like a 100-foot setback, 100-foot front yard setback. Otherwise, I couldn't find anything that was as strict as this. So this is quite a distance requirement for these accessory structures. And then the last restriction is on access. It's very particular that public access has to be from either South Beverwick Road or Troy Meadow Road and no other road. And then I buried the lead. This only applies to properties that are 200 contiguous acres owned by the same property owner. So it's because of that only the Troy Meadows area is even relevant to this conversation, because there are no other that we could find RCW areas in Parsippany that meet that criteria, that are 200 contiguous acres and that are owned by one entity. So we're really talking about what's on the map before you, and I'll get to in a minute, the Troy Meadows area, and even more than that, it's subject to these particular requirements on size, buffers, and access. So I know that there was a lot of desire at the last meeting to see this, to visualize this. So Frank Banish and his office did prepare these maps, and I'll go through them. I think Ellen might have some printouts if anybody wants to take a look, but they're up here. And what this really shows, this is the Troy Meadows area, the RCW zone, and this is really showing ownership. So the light green is wildlife preserves, which, as is obvious from the map, owns the majority of this area. I think it's about 3/4 of the acreage of this site, of this zone. Other owners are the state, the county. There's another nonprofit group that owns a small parcel. The township itself owns some of this land, and then there's a couple privately owned parcels. But the majority of it is owned by wildlife preserves, and that's what helps get them to that criteria of 200 contiguous acres owned by one entity. There, as you can see a little bit, I don't know if everybody in the audience can see, there are parcels within this, this zone, but they're owned by that one entity. And this map, the most obvious feature here is the blue, and that is wetlands. So this is a really important factor in this conversation. You know, I just went through the limitations that are in place in the proposed zoning as to the location, the buffers, the access, and the size of these these potential accessory structures. But they're further limited by the fact that the vast majority of this land is in a wetland. So you can see on this map, the blue shows a wetland area that really is not buildable for anything of substance. I mean, you'd have to get DEP approval. So it's very difficult to develop anything significant there. And then further, you can see on this map, the yellow is the outline of the zone, and the red shows that 150-foot buffer. So they'd have to be set back behind that red line. So they'd have to be behind that red line, and they'd have to be basically out of the blue. And so you can really start to see how small of an area we're talking about as to where any kind of future development of these accessory uses could be. And this is just a detailed area so that those of you who might live nearby can kind of see, if you're familiar with where your street is, you can kind of see where.
Can't see it. Can't see any of this.
It's hard to read. Okay. Well, you can see in the little inset on the bottom that you're talking about sort of the northwestern portion of this area. I can't read myself. Let me grab a hard copy.
So, if it helps the public, they can obviously
If
move
you could
closer
just
to the
point
screen.
out- If you could just point out where Troy Road is and where
Yep.
South Beverwick Road
Yep.
is, that would help everybody orient.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep. So
Troy Meadow, thank you.
I'm going to go back to the larger map so we can orient ourselves, because you can definitely see those two roadways on that map.
Hey, Ed, did you bring your little laser map so she can point with that?
Right, I have a roving mic. So you could see the street name that you can't read the street, but you can maybe see that there's letters there crossing sort of along the middle of that map. That's Troy Meadow Road. So that's sort of bisecting this area. And then Beverwick is sort of parallel to a lot of that yellow line on the left. If I could get behind the pews here, I'll get closer. Here's Beverwick, South Beverwick, and there's Troy Meadow. So those are the two roads that would have to require any access. So you can see that there's a little bit of a hole in that blue. That's an area where there could potentially be an accessory structure based on the access requirements, based on the fact that it's not wetland. So that, you know, that's a potential area. Perhaps up there at the top corner, you can see an area that's not in blue. However, it doesn't have access to Troy Meadow Road, so I'm not really sure how that would happen. So you start to really, when you nail down and drill down into this, you start to really see that the area is not that big that you're talking about dealing with. And so if you keep this in your memory, this is the big map, and we're going to zoom in to the top left corner a little bit, just to see the detail. So you can see, so South Beverwick is a little bit on the left-hand side, on the bottom left for orientation, and then Troy Meadow Road, you can see a little bit at the bottom. This is just showing you just how much of this area is basically in wetland and the setback that would have to be required from that residential zone. And then this is sort of moving south, showing you the same thing, really how wet this area is and the distance requirement from any residential areas. So I think with that, I'll entertain any questions from the council, and I think that there might be some folks from the public who want to make some comments.
So just to repeat, the change that's being made only applies to this parcel, the RCW change, even though there are other RCW sites in town, it only applies to this because this exceeds the 200-acre minimum.
And is owned by one
And is
entity.
owned by one entity.
Yeah.
So there is no other area in town that meets those criteria that this would apply to.
Yes, and you know what I think would be helpful? I have a map that I believe shows all the RCW zones, and I think might be helpful to folks.
She has it from her own.
Easy application. She's doing
So I know this is not 100% readable either, but I think those of you who know the township, hopefully you can orient yourselves. That big blank area, sort of in the top, that's the reservoir. That might help. But the area that we're really talking about is on that right-hand side, the lower right-hand corner. That's all the Troy Meadows area. So as you can see, there are other areas that are green. Those are RCW zones. That some of them, for instance, the Mount Tabor Homeowners Association property up there on the top left-hand corner. There's township-owned property along Mountain Way. It doesn't total 200 acres in one contiguous area. And then there's just a couple other parcels. So you can see that it does exist elsewhere in the township. It's just that it doesn't meet that criteria, so it's not going to be affected by this zoning change.
Wait, hold on. We're gonna go in order, sir. You'll be able to come up to the mic and ask her all your questions.
Okay. See the
I'm sorry? Lights? Lights? They don't work anymore. I didn't tell you that? No. Any meeting past 2 hours, the lights stop working.
First off, does the council have any other questions?
No,
I don't think so.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Do you want to read the public hearing part?
Well, let's see if the residents want them.
Right, that's what we're going to do.
Right.
Public hearing.
Okay.
Yep.
Motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2018:12.
Second.
I'm sorry, we've already,
Okay.
we already had a
to
motion
clo-
for the
well,
public hearing. We had the
okay. We already
presentation.
did
Hearing,
Yeah.
come on up.
Yeah,
So
We should invite members of the public at this time to come forward and express their comments or opinions.
Please state your name and address and sign in. You'll be given 5 minutes.
John Quinn, 20 Mohawk Avenue, Lake Hiawatha. I only have one question on the previous map. When you're talking about a possible structure and what is and is not wetlands. So if I'm correct, looking at the last map of Troy Meadow Road, what you're saying is the only spot that might be potentially impacted to build on anything at all would be the old Troy Meadow Trap Club site, which is at the end of that road, because everything else you're saying is deemed as wetlands. So there's very low impact there, is what you're saying.
Could you just, is that your only question, sir?
Yes, my only question. That's
Because we're going to answer all the, after they ask all their questions, then you go ahead and answer. No, go ahead, you can answer this question.
The short answer is I don't know if that's the track club site, because I don't know that site in particular, but what you can see in this map here is, again, there's sort of a donut hole kind of in the middle of this property, and there's a little bit of piece right at the end of Troy Meadow Road, and a couple other isolated parcels that you can visualize on the map that could potentially accommodate one of these types of uses. I mean, I think it would require some intelligent planning on the part of the property owner in terms of where your environmental center could go, given that that's sort of your largest potential use. The coverage is about 4,000 square feet, where a ranger relief station would make sense and where you could put it. There's a lot of planning that would have to happen, and they will clearly have to, when they make an application, they'll have to come to the planning board. That will be a whole process, a public process, that they'll go through, and the planning board would be looking at these issues. And as well, they may require DEP approval for whatever they do. So there is another step to whenever they get to the point where they have an actual application or an actual development proposal, they'll have to come back to the township planning board for the particulars on that.
Thank you.
Anybody here remember, was that where the trap chute was years ago?
There's no way it's going down there. I mean, that's swamp now.
The trap chute is further back into the swamp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bob Algieri. I live on 39 Parkside. I'm on the corner of Troy Meadow Road and Parkside Drive. Now, I thought we were going to have a map showing the proposed zone change areas with the zones marked on it. I thought that's what we agreed on last time. But I think what we're all talking about, everybody seems to be beating around the bush with where this location is going to be or is going to be proposed. I'm sure they know what they're going to do. I don't think anybody could just be this vague about their future plans. I'm sure they know a spot. And if the spot is where we all think it is, between Troy Meadow Road and, what's your street? Brookside. And Brookside, it's going to be disastrous for the people in the area. The storm drains. I have to tell you, I had the worst experience of my life this last rainstorm. Normally the water just shoots up out of the sewers at the bottom of Troy Meadow. This time it came up above my driveway apron. The water was so high, the sump pump couldn't pump out against the water pressure that was out on the curb. If anybody builds anything there, and that strip above to the side of Troy Meadow Road where there are no houses, and we all know where we're talking about. We're talking about the strip on Troy Meadow Road near Parkside Drive. If I'm flooded due to any more construction, they built all those houses up on Troy Road, I saw a huge difference in the water pattern. Any other construction, I think we're going to have major problems. I think we're going to get flooded. And I have to tell you, if you approve this, I'm going to hold you guys responsible, really. This is this needs major research before this could be built. Major research. Before any houses should be put there.
There are no houses.
There's no house.
There's no houses.
No houses.
Oh,
There's no houses.
There's no houses.
Parking lot and structures. And who's going to police the parking lot? We have drug addicts down there now shooting up behind my house.
But it's
Drinking, parties. No one polices that area. And I'm going to tell you, if you do this, you're doing the wrong thing if you approve this. That's all I have to say. We're hurting everyone in that area.
Look at how, this is Troy. That's the only, look how far it's in. You know what we're talking about? Open up the ground.
I have to send you guys videos of what happens there when it rains. I took some
Sure.
videos.
If you can get them to our clerk and he'll get them to us.
Yeah, Vincent Perowick for Brookside Court, Parsippany. Is this a foregone conclusion? That's my first question. Or does anything we say matter, and can it change the arrangement that's being made as a settlement? These three accessories, I still don't know where they're located, as Bob indicated. I live on Brookside Court, and it's adjacent to Troy Meadow Road. You make reference to an entrance to this location now being either Troy Meadow Road or Beverwick Road, and I can't see on this map where either one of them would enter this area that we're talking about. I know that Beverwick Road, you make a left before you get to Reynolds. And I could see Beverwick Road having an entrance somewhere at the location that's being proposed. But I don't know how far away that is from the location that I'm at, Brookside Court. So I'd like that. And also the 200 acres that we're making reference to, that's a large area. I don't know where that is on the map that's been shown here.
That's that whole area.
Say it again?
That's the whole
That's the
thing.
whole
green-
area
That's
that
the
you're
whole
looking
green
at.
area.
Vince.
Okay.
That's the whole
And
area.
so we don't know where in that area where the 4 structures might be built?
Susan, can you advance to the next slide, please?
Yeah,
Everything you see in blue,
you can't build in.
you
can't
cannot
build
build on. It's the little black patches
Yeah.
that they could possibly put the ranger station or their maintenance.
Right, and this is 4,000 square feet
Yeah.
as well, so it has to be able to accommodate it as well.
Exactly.
Correct.
Okay, well, now, would someone point out to me where Troy Meadow Road is and where Brookside Court
The
is?
biggest black piece, right? It
Right
goes
across
right
the
through
middle of
that.
the-
See
yeah.
the middle? It's right there. I'm gonna, yeah, right there. It goes right straight across.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, and Brookside Court?
I think at the end of Troy Meadow Road.
Yeah.
Okay. So do you have an estimation as to how far that black area is from Troy Meadow and Brookside?
It's,
Well, isn't the yellow and the green, isn't that the 150?
That's
No, he's
150,
talking about
so.
that black area in the
Yeah,
No,
I'm
no,
talking
but
about-
she's
Yeah, I know,
saying
but
if
I'm
you
saying
can
the
measure
buffer is
150,
feet.
it's like 400, 500.
Looks more than that.
Oh,
Yeah, more than
I
that.
think it's probably more than that. The
Yeah.
red line represents
Is the
150 feet
yeah,
from the
right.
closest residential property
So
line.
look at it, it's hundreds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hundreds.
Okay. And so, okay, one more question. Now, what about the old trap chute? How far down is that from the, or is that in the black area?
Can you make that out?
I think that's at the very end, right?
You say at the end of the road?
Where's Troy
The
Meadow
end
Road is
in
here.
which direction? Which way?
The trap
I
chute was
think-
the end of Troy Meadow Road down
Well,
in
I'm-
here someplace.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
So,
It's due-
Troy
It's
Meadow.
due east, I believe. right?
Due east,
It's in the blue.
Yeah, it's in the blue.
It's in the blue.
It's,
it's in the blue,
it's in the blue.
Yeah, it's,
so it can't be both on.
The trap chute is in the blue section area now, which
Okay.
cannot be built on.
Right, but I mean, the black area is what can be built on,
Yeah.
right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, now, does Troy Meadow Road go beyond that black area to the right?
Goes into the blue.
It goes into the wetlands
Yeah,
area.
it goes
Yeah.
into the
Oh,
blue.
it does, okay.
Yeah,
It's all in the blue area, yes.
yeah. The blue you
Okay.
can't build on, just the
All
little
right,
black
thank you.
area.
One more question. I know this costs money. I mean, the court case, and also the plans that were drawn up proposing building sites. I'm just wondering, who's paying for that? Who's paying for the plans that were drawn up, the engineering plans that I have with me here, showing 3 sites, 3 buildings being proposed off Brookside Court on the part of the CRW. Someone must be paying for the court case, and someone must be paying for the plans that were drawn up. Can anybody tell me who?
Well, the township rezoned this property RCW a number of years ago.
Right.
I mean, that's not new. The township did that and paid for it years ago, okay? What this is doing now is just clarifying what is allowed in this RCW zone. That's what's happening now.
Okay,
It's already RCW.
I understand. But the engineering plans that were prepared, the township didn't.
The
put-
plans to do what?
To build a building, build buildings.
There are no plans to build a building.
All right,
At this
then
point in
I need
time.
someone to show me the plans that I have. Who prepared them? They're right across the road from me.
I think you might be referring to the previously approved.
Okay, so there was a prior application submitted by Wildlife in
Yeah.
connection with a residential subdivision that goes back to like 2015.
Yes,
The plan-
that's right.
The planning board took action on that. Those plans were prepared by Wildlife in connection with their site plan application.
All right. So Wildlife paid for that?
Correct.
Okay. Where did they get the money from?
Oh, I don't know how they derive their income, sir.
Well, I mean, if all they have is wildlife, how do they produce money from that to pay for these plans?
You'll have to ask them
I
that.
guess ask them that. We have representatives of wildlife here tonight. If you want to explain what your
Well, that- yeah,
what your
that's something
funding
they can-
sources are.
Yeah, if you want to speak to them outside, you can find out from them how they raise their money.
I would think that you might have asked them that question. I mean, I think it's relative.
Well, it's a
but
privately held
It's
parcel.
a privately held, not-for-profit organization, so I don't know what fundraising they engage in.
All right. I don't expect to get an answer from them, so. But all right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Przicki, 273 Marcella Road. I'm a little confused here. When you say 200 acres, what would happen with Jersey City Reservoir? How many acres is that if it becomes open for hiking trails, et cetera, et cetera? Then this zoning ordinance would apply to that too. And you've got residential people, why not?
I don't know that to be true. I don't think that the reservoir is zoned RCW.
Okay, that,
I believe it's zoned residential, but we can check the zoning map to make sure. There's a zoning map, Susan, inside the conference.
No, they sued us years ago. There was,
this is not, you're answering my question, so that's not my time.
this doesn't count on your time, Mary. Just a little history, okay? It initially was zoned residential when they built it and they flooded the town that was there underneath.
Right.
It was residential. Some aggressive auditing firm came through and told them, we can save you a lot of money, and they sued the town to rezone the property so they were not paying residential rates to the township.
Okay, we can check the, right, we can check the zoning
Still?
map.
Then they could sell it. Yeah,
Sell the reservoir.
Now,
That's not
it's
the
also
taxes.
devoted to public use, and it's also potentially exempt from zoning without some further analysis, but, so I think the threshold question is, it's not subject to the zoning ordinance that we're currently discussing.
What about Mount Tabor
We
Country
let
Club?
her ask all of her questions.
Okay.
We'll answer them at the end.
Okay.
Sure.
The golf course at Mount Tabor, what is that zone for?
I don't think it
And then-
meets the threshold 200 acres.
Hold on, is that your last question?
It's 98, so it's less than.
Probably. The other thing of, oh, no, it's not my last question. My last question is this settlement, that was when they rezoned what they had as residential properties, and I think they had some commercial, and then they patched them all together and changed those zonings to RCW, is that?
That's correct. That
that's
happened
correct.
about there were actually 3 ordinances, and it happened between 2014 and 2015.
Correct. And then, but when 1950, the way I have found some records, in 1955, on Allen and Marshall Drive, those 13 lots were deeded over by the developer to wildlife preserves, so they would not be developed on. And if that was part of and parcel of the lawsuit and you settled, how did you settle this lawsuit? I don't understand the settlement.
Well, the settlement was what we discussed at the last meeting, as outlined now by the ordinance. I don't know if there are other deed restrictions on the property that preclude development.
That was given to the township. I know it was, because I gave it to them. So that when you settled this out for things like what you're proposing now, I mean, did you have all the facts?
Yeah,
That might have been there.
we had all the facts. I mean, there was a negotiation between the township and wildlife to allow them some reasonable use of the property that the zoning ordinance had not heretofore provided for.
So when you say that center piece of land over there by Troy Meadows Road is the only piece that they could probably put anything in, how are you, if it's an educational center, how are you going to get people down if you don't put a road? And if you're telling me that that's all wetlands, how is that possible? Is it going to get DEP approval?
I mean,
It's
that's the
impervious
subject,
surface.
that, it's potentially subject to a lot of DEP permitting requirements, which
Well-
are not, not part of this zoning ordinance. There are a whole host of other laws that the property owner would need to comply with.
It's just so vague that I think if you had this ordinance and it was more specific, it would have gotten better general public support. But when you're as vague as you are there and you give these people only 150 feet, if I have my really good binoculars, bird watching, I could watch them to see what they're doing in their kitchen. 200, I mean, you gave Waterview 200 feet buffer zone, and you're only giving these people 150. And if they put observation points there, hey, what if I wanted to,
1 minute.
1 minute? Just think of what's going to happen to their privacy. The buffer zone should have been bigger for them. It really should have, because you have all residents buffering that area now. And then they're going to have the traffic down Troy Meadow Road. The only other spot you can put a educational center is the Helen Dutton Environmental Center that was there on South Beverick
30
Road
seconds.
and destroyed by vandals. That's acceptable, but what you're proposing as buffer zone for them, I don't think is.
Mr. Lott, if you could also answer, one of her questions was about the Mount Tabor Golf Course, if that was...
Right, I think we looked at that and determined that that's about 90 acres, right, and it's less than the threshold amount, so again, this ordinance would not be applicable there.
Thank you.
Nick Holmiak, Lake Hiawatha. Does Wildlife Preserves have like a future plan to attract more people to the preserve so they can make income? Is that the underlying background of these changes? What they said there was 4, but I only recorded 3. One was agriculture. So I'd like to have that further explained. And then the garage, a garage for what exactly? For the pickup trucks for the Rangers. So the some of these things could be consolidated, I would think, all in one block lot maybe, instead of scattered all over the place. But I would think, though, that anything that would improve their experience or make other people go there to increase their income, I would think, though, that the scrutiny would be well taken care of by the DEP, even the Highlands Coalition, and I believe that Wildlife Preserves is a national natural resource landmark. So I don't know if that would affect it at all, or if that's just a prestigious title. But I would like to know if there's just, more. Like Wildlife Preserves is proposing this because it would help them have a better future to preserve and appreciate and have others appreciate this natural resource.
Hi, my name is William Kinzer. I live at 32 Parkside Drive. I grew up there, been there 22 years, right by Troy Meadow Road. My question, sorry if this is naive, I just don't understand why we need these accessories, so to speak. I just don't understand the point in having them. We have the land, the town has the land. if we have to build a road to get to these accessories, I see it as more traffic in our neighborhoods. Yeah, I guess my question is, I don't understand why it's needed in the town.
I think my response to that as a lawyer would be that the enactment of standards actually gives the township more control as to where any potential development would take place on the property. The accessory standards that are provided for or proposed in the ordinance are consistent with the preservation mission of wildlife and its mission to preserve the land.
And also you said we have the land. The land is privately owned. It's not town land.
That's correct.
So we don't have it. They
Right.
have it, and we're putting boundaries on what they can do with it.
And
Hi, I'm Casey Parikh, 45 D Cross Court. I'll just ask my questions first. I want to know where is the Smith Road on this map? Okay. I also want to know, is there any parking lot going to be associated with this? How big of a parking lot that will be? What kind of vehicles we are expecting that may come? Because that affects the neighborhood. Okay. Another thing that will affect the neighborhood is there will be probably lights. And remember, all these are wetlands. You are going to have electric poles somewhere. So maybe these structures will come close to the road, Beverick Road or a Troy Meadow Road. Because you need to bring us water, you need to bring the lights. So I'm just thinking that a lot of the black spaces you are showing between the wetlands, but in reality, the lights and sewer and parking lots and other things, that will narrow it down to probably 1 or 2 pieces of properties over there, and you can help us. You can show us where that can be, instead of just saying that it can be anywhere in the black areas. It does limit it. And I would like to see what you think those areas will be. Because there will be some roads that needs to access those area. Okay. And buffer. I agree with Mary that 150 feet is not enough buffer. It's too close. I mean, I used to have a backyard that was 150 feet, and I know how close that is. So you need to rethink about the buffer area too. Okay. So that's all I have. If I can get some of the questions answered. Thank you.
If you could, I think his first question was, where's Smith Road on there?
Smith Road or a Smith Road track? Smith Road. Smith Road. Well off the map, I would say.
Right.
Yeah, it's off the
It's some distance west of this. All right.
His second question was, would there be a parking lot too?
Can I just say something?
Sure.
The reason I ask is because I received 2 certified mails and another mail.
Right.
Total cost of about $15 for that. I received 3 notices within 2 days. So I thought it must be very important for me.
Right.
That's the reason.
I think that you received the notices because of your proximity to Smith Field, which I believe is also zoned RCW. As we explained,
His proximity is Forge Pond.
Forge Pond, right, which is also I believe zoned as
It is.
RCW as
That's
well.
why you
Right.
received the notice, because of Forge Pond.
Yeah, it's not because of what you can live close to.
His second question was, will there be any parking, is there any plans or anything for parking lot or provisions for
So-
parking lot?
Well, I just want to say that there's no plans for anything. I just
Right.
want to reiterate that. There's no proposed developments in sites, no proposed development, period.
Right, I'm just repeating his questions.
And I think in terms of a parking lot, that would fall under the existing accessory definition that you have now, which is anything incidental to the principal permitted use. So a parking lot is not really, it's not contemplated in the zoning change that you have before you. It exists now. They could put in a parking area to whatever they're doing on their property. Obviously, they'd have to meet zoning requirements, setback, DEP. It would be subject to whatever regulations are in place now, and that's not proposed to change.
Correct.
Thank you. No, sorry, you were already up here before.
I know, but you know what, we were promised a map with the proposed zone changes on it, and we
So-
didn't get it.
So I want to be clear, all right? There's no zone change here. The zone change occurred years ago, all right? This is an amendment to the RCW zone district standards.
Okay.
All right, so there's a distinction. There's no rezoning of any property.
It doesn't matter. We don't know what zones any of this is. We have no idea.
We just heard an explanation about the limits of the RCW zone district.
It doesn't make any sense to me. Our concerns are, let's face it, our concerns are the tract of land between Parkside Drive, going up Troy Meadow Road to Beverly. That's the main concern, because if that is developed, we're in trouble.
Ms. Favati, just so we're clear on this, why don't you go back to the map that shows the outline of the zone district boundary as it relates to Troy Meadow?
Because you can speak to her.
One of my questions wasn't answered before, that's why I'm asking.
Oh, which one was that?
That was the one about whether the settlement was concluded.
yellow
Is
line
this
and
a
the red line.
foregone conclusion?
No.
It's not?
No.
So it's still subject to being changed?
There you go.
Is the settlement subject to change, Jen?
The settlement is not subject to change unless council directs me to go back to wildlife and have a discussion of whether or not the settlement should be changed. But as of right now, the settlement is final, and it's also been entered into court.
Well, then why are we here? See, that's part of my question.
We're here, sir, because one of the provisions of the settlement agreement was that the township act to change the zone district standards in the RCW zone district. That was part of our settlement agreement.
And we were also advised that we could indicate our objection or...
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That's why we're having the hearing tonight, and that was the purpose of the notice as well.
So, but does it do any good?
Yeah, there's action pending before the council. Council needs to take action on the zone amendment.
But you said it was finalized.
No, I said the settlement agreement was finalized.
Right.
With the settlement agreement is settled, the town and RCW in court. But
Okay.
still, it was approved by the planning board
Yes.
and now the council.
All right. So there's nothing subject to change then?
Only if the council.
I see this as we are proactively defining what can be built on private land that the town does not own. So it would be as though we were going to dictate what you could build on your land.
Sure.
Could you put up a 15-story high-rise? No, we would have to come and do something like this. So we are saying it has to be accessible by an existing road. That's not they're not building residential. It's a very specific use that has to be accessible from a existing road. So the 150-foot buffer that's in question, a lot of that isn't even on the table for development because it's not accessible. Now, a bird watching station, that may be the case, but they could be building that anyway, first of all. And second of all, we're telling them it has to be within this 150-foot zone. And I tend to believe in people's better nature that someone going up there with a pair of binoculars is there to look at birds.
Right. And it would have to be at least 150 feet away from any adjacent residential structure. That's the minimum setback distance.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, it's adjacent residential lot line, that's correct, that's right. That's the minimum setback
I have
distance.
a question. Sir, you got up and spoke at our last meeting, correct? What is your address again? 1050 South Beverly Road. So can you just point out that address for me up there?
That's your check your address.
10.
Leonard Webb would be the closest. By the curve?
What is that?
So there's all blue.
there is a potential dark spot there.
Yeah.
But it's not next to any kind of a road. Well, I
Yes.
guess from that picture, this little triangle, possible. I don't know how big that area is.
So they could build something there.
But they can do that today.
Right, they can do that already without us doing anything.
Yeah.
Why don't, but the 150
But if you're
feet-
further down this way, it's all blue, so
It's
they
all
can't
blue.
do anything there, depending on where you are.
It's all blue.
Anything that's in blue, it's swamp. They can't do anything on it.
That's swamp back there.
Well, then,
And they can't
then
do
they can't do
anything.
anything on it near your property. I just wanted to, I know you had some questions and you brought up some points last meeting, so I wanted to get those answered for you.
And as I understand it, doesn't this revert back to that being open then, right? It's not this accessory zoning or restricting what they can do or limiting.
Well, I mean, in a hypothetical sense, right now, without any zone district controls, all right, and they would be able to, the property owner would be able to locate any accessory structure,
That's
all
what I'm
right,
saying.
without any setback distance at all. So conceivably, they could, right, or without any size control, all right? They could put it right on someone's property line. Now, would the planning board allow that? I don't know. That would be the subject of a development application.
Well, would they
So it's-
allow anything here as well?
Right,
So that's
exactly.
the same issue.
So anything that wildlife wants to propose on these areas that are beyond the 150-foot setback, they have to go to the planning board to have the planning board approve any of these structures. Even though we may have it listed in our ordinance, they still have to go before the planning board, and everything, it would have to be approved by the planning board members.
Correct, it would be the subject of a site plan application, and all the other required approvals, county soil conservation district approval, DEP approval,
Well, I'm hearing.
county planning board approval.
I'm hearing the resident talk about lighting. We've got wildlife, excuse me. We have swamp here. Where are we going to put, or where are they, we don't know where they're proposing it. But these are questions I think that some of the residents are thinking about.
And I can
where
tell
are
you
they
there are
gonna be
questions
putting
that the planning board has already started thinking about, because when we discussed this in terms of master plan consistency, the planning board raised questions about parking lots and lighting and those types of impacts. And they're valid questions, and they're questions that would certainly be an important part of a development application that they would have to submit to the planning board, and then they'd have to answer those questions.
And I think it's also, again, it bears repeating that all of the other township development controls would apply. Lighting, stormwater, soil movement, signage, location of utilities.
So we're adding restrictions, not relieving them.
That is correct.
So that gentleman's questions about flooding and stuff like that, that's something that the planning board, those issues are gonna have to be addressed if they are in the future. Going to look.
I want officially on the record that I mentioned this, because the situation's getting worse and worse now.
Has anything come before you've just mentioned that questions have been raised as far as parking and lighting. Has these issues been raised presently, or are these the past issues?
These issues were raised a month or so ago in a planning board meeting where I think it was right after your first reading, or it was actually the night before your first reading, the planning board had to consider this particular zone change in terms of master plan consistency. They had to make a determination of whether this proposed change is consistent with the master plan. So it was in the context of that meeting within the last month or so that the planning board started asking, well, what does this mean, and what kind of development could we see here? And again, those are all great questions, but there is no actual development proposed here. And at the point when there is, or if there is, those would be questions that the planning board would ask and would have to be answered. So, and I would also note that that other township department heads would probably be opining on this as well. I mean, I'm sure engineering would probably have something to say, particularly with regards to flooding. So there would be a full, reckoning, a full review of this, whatever development proposal there is.
Thank you.
But again, only for the structures we talked about, not for an apartment complex or buildings or housing. So again, it needs to, I'm sorry, it just needs to be said again.
We have someone here from the Wildlife Preserve. I know the young lady spoke the last time. Is it possible for you to come up, and I know you've been making notes, possibly you can come up again and just alleviate some of the concerns? Come on.
Sure.
But wait a minute, we have another resident that may want to come up? Come up.
My name is Bill Hosley. I'm at 1128 South Beverick Road. The parcel she was just looking at, the bend on South Beverick Road, where it is highlighted, the dark area, we've noticed a lot of the park rangers there recently. That piece of property would be big enough for what they're talking about for their building, so we're curious on if they have plans on going that route with the building on that parcel. That's my only question.
Okay.
All right.
Well, the representative from Wildlife Preserve is here, and I think if she comes up and, maybe she has some answers to your concerns, as she did the last time.
Do we need to sign in?
You should sign in and identify yourself for the record.
Oh, yeah. How's my blood pressure? Sounds fine.
Should we speak to the?
Into the mic. Yeah, to us.
To you, yeah.
Yes.
Oops, sorry. Hi, I'm Anita Shotwell, and I'm the managing trustee for Wildlife Preserves. As some but not all of you know, Wildlife Preserves Incorporated, or Wildlife for short, is a 501c3 charitable land preservation organization that owns or manages roughly 2,000 acres of land in Troy Meadows, with other open space holdings in New Jersey and New York State. Whether you've heard of us or not, Wildlife Preserves has actually served the public of Parsippany Troy Hills through the preservation of Troy Meadows for more than 60 years. If there is a lack of information about Wildlife Preserve's purpose or mission, it is largely because Wildlife's founder, the late Robert Perkins, was so humble about his accomplishments. Starting in the 1950s, Mr. Perkins spearheaded the protection of this national natural landmark by cobbling together parcels of what was considered at the time prime building land to create a wildlife sanctuary in Par Troy and neighboring East Hanover. This was all done through private philanthropy and at no cost to taxpayers and without government funding, and it took place years before most people recognized the value of open space, in fact decades before the New Jersey Freshwater Wetlands Protection Act or the Highland Act. Wildlife Preserve's first priority is the preservation of habitat for the plant and animal residents of Troy Meadows and our other wildlife sanctuary areas, which over the last 60 years has meant the perpetual threat of encroachment and trespass by state DOT, utility companies, and even private for-profit enterprises like the Pilgrim Oil Pipeline. Many of these groups view open space as a simple and inexpensive place to expand their rights of way and blaze new trails miles long through privately owned and protected wetland and upland habitat. As I mentioned at part one of this hearing, I came over to Wildlife after 30 years in animal welfare, and I took on the duty of managing trustee in the beginning of 2014. We have been embroiled in litigation with the township on the issue of zoning since that time, but we are looking forward to putting this dispute behind us and to working with the local government and residents toward our many common goals, including preservation of Troy Meadows. I absolutely understand and appreciate the confusion surrounding this ordinance, and from my own background, I view that as a positive sign that residents care about their neighborhoods and the environment. I recognize that we will have to earn your trust in the coming years and hope that we'll be able to do that. With regard to the expanded use in the RCW ordinance, as was previously noted, this is part of a compromise with the township that actually removes significant residential and industrial zoning in Troy Meadows that prevents these developments and puts in place the type of zoning that is comparable with what the Morris County Parks and the Great Swamp National Wildlife Refuge have. That is not to say that all or any of these structures in the ordinance will ever be realized, but if something is ever built, the maximum use is limited to something that is appropriate for the area as opposed to a warehouse or an assembly plant. Wildlife would someday like to have a nature center in Troy Meadows for educational purposes and to support the preservation of Troy Meadows. Using Craftsman's Farms that spoke 2 weeks ago as one example, an education center can take years to fund and several more years to conceive and plan. This is not something around the corner any more than it was the day before residents received these ordinance notices in the mail. As someone who spends time on site at Troy Meadows, I personally would like to see a staff area or ranger station where we can use a restroom, warm our feet in the winter, and recharge our cameras. As a nonprofit organization based in this community, it is in our best interest to be as transparent as possible with regard to any proposed action and to make sure everything we do is of minimal impact to the environment and the community. To that end, I want to just quickly clarify what seems to be a major cause of distress for many residents, and that is the issue of value and land when it comes to open space. In the state of New Jersey, a property is appraised at its highest and best use, which is invariably the potential for development. In fact, as I mentioned before, dozens of these Troy Meadows land parcels were rescued from residential development at full market price to be added to the Troy Meadows land inventory. Other parcels were once slated for industrial and office use. It is unfortunate that for-profit businesses, public utilities or otherwise, do not equally value the ecological or community potential of property. Maintaining the highest market value is one major deterrent against encroachment, seizure, or forcible sale of our private sanctuary land for public purposes by making it more expensive for others to do so. If you look at the number of times this has been done to wildlife preserves in our 60-year history, including the construction of Routes 80 and 280, Algonquin Pipeline, Eastern Texas Pipeline, Parsippany Troy Hills sewer lines and pump station, PSE&G and JCP&L power lines, it may help residents to understand why we resort to litigation to maintain highest and best use, including development rights, for sanctuary property. The township settlement with RCW zoning to apply to wildlife is a win-win for the residents and wildlife's purpose of preservation. In the case of Parsippany Troy Hills, which is Wildlife Preserve's home base, the highest and best use strategy we have clung to in recent years has been at the cost of our relationship with the public. And so with this settlement, we are sacrificing our overall property value with the hope of building our support in the community as we count on residents and neighbors to be another line of defense against encroachment and unauthorized use of Troy Meadows. And people can take the time to look at our history on our website at wildlifepreserves.org or contact us. There's a contact form with email for anyone who wants to reach us directly with questions that they have or concerns that they have. And that's important to us as another member of the community. And we look forward to hearing from residents and working with them and with the township for the benefit of our shared community, which includes Troy Meadows. So I'm not sure what else it was that you wanted.
Well, I thought possibly you would be addressing some of the concerns that these residents have had this evening. I appreciate you coming here. I appreciate your statements that you've made, but I don't think you've answered any of these questions.
What are the questions? I thought most of these questions had been answered by.
Well, evidently, the questions of whether it be Mary or the other gentleman that lives on Troy Road or the people that live on Brookside, these are still I believe, some important questions that they have.
I would agree. Anything that residents have that is questions, it affects us.
Yes.
But most of these are questions that can't be answered. Contrary to popular belief, we do not have plans. I know people have indicated that this is where it's going to be, or that's where it's going to be, or that they've seen some sort of activity. And there is nothing, it's not to say that we would not like to have something, or that it would not be something that we deserve to have, or be useful and fully in compliance with that, the use of the property. But we do not have plans, and they're not answers that we can provide. But we would be happy to take, a list of people who want to be advisory or some capacity as we move forward. But I'm not sure what other questions have not been answered by Mr. Lott and by the planner. I'm sorry, I forget your name.
You just said something that I think some of these people
Yes.
may be interested
Yes.
in. You said an advisory board, if any of these
Right
residents
now-
would like to be part of, maybe, in the decision-making process, that something that you may look to do in the future? I mean,
Right,
if that's possible,
that's-
that some of these people could be involved in that, that would be great.
Right. We have, I think, right now on our website, there is a sign up for Friends of Troy Meadows, or people can contact me via email. There's a form on there for Anita Shotwell under contacts. That would be something, we would like to work with the community on anything, including everyday concerns that we've not. I heard a lot of people speak 2 weeks ago about the ATV traffic and four-wheel drive traffic and things of that nature that clearly need to be reported more and documented and addressed. So it doesn't have to just be about building, but anything that involves working with the community.
I agree.
Thank you.
There's a form on the website at wildlifepreserves.org, and it's for Anita Shotwell. And any of those concerns, because we heard a lot last week, and we wanted to open a dialogue.
Thank you. Okay, see no one else come forward to entertain a motion to close the public hearing?
Hi, my name's Isabella Alfano. I live in 8 New England Drive. I appreciate the understanding that now there's going to be transparency, but the reason why people and the residents are so confused is because they receive these notices without any advance notice. And quite frankly, I love the colors of the map, but I still don't know. 200 acres is a lot of land, and as you mentioned, this is where they're looking at now, but potentially, once this is settled, I started to look around my neighborhood. I don't know what's clearly defined now as now what belongs to RCW. So behind my house, I have this large area called Field Fair property. Do we know, can we know now what is now rezoned, what's renamed, what's reowned, what they can potentially build on? Because my understanding is that, okay, this gets passed, we're talking about this area right now, but down the road, they can potentially do whatever they want now. No, because the last gentleman was talking about, oh, well, property doesn't mean anything unless we can monetize on it. And that's what he kept saying. So if we're talking about monetizing area, then I just want to have a clear understanding, what areas are we talking about? I mean, that was a lot of light green.
So again, this map shows where the locations are throughout Parsippany Troy Hills that are currently zoned RCW. So this potential zoning change only affects the existing RCW zone. There are no boundary changes proposed to the RCW zone. But further, most of these, all of these green areas except for the Troy Meadows area that's owned by Wildlife Preserves are not subject to this proposed zoning change because they don't meet that threshold of both 200 acres, contiguous acres, and those acres being owned by one entity. So none of these other areas would be subject to future development under this ordinance. And then further, what I perhaps should have made clear at the outset, everything that's colored on this map is currently zoned RCW and will remain zoned RCW. But within this colored area, all of the light green is owned by Wildlife Preserves. So it's only that area within this larger sort of site that meets that threshold and that's subject to the ability to have these different types of accessory uses subject to being 150 feet away from a residential zone, having access off of either South Beverwick or Troy Meadow, and those building coverage limitations. So we're talking about the light green area, but within that light green area, there are those limitations which I just spoke about.
Thank you. Okay, this time I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, or motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is closed. Whereas.
Okay. Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on the second reading and hearing held thereon, now therefore it be resolved and said ordinance be passed on final reading, and that the notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance 2018:13. An ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, Morris County, New Jersey, granting a utility easement to Morris Corporate Center 6 LLC over a portion of Block 136, Lot 44 on the tax map of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, on July 31st, 2018. The ordinance was introduced at the July 24th, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept that the ordinance 2018:13 be heard in its second and final reading by title only. Motion.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. Need a motion to open the public.
Public hearing 2018:13, motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2018:13 by myself.
Second, Grignani.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
The floor is open for members of the public to speak on this ordinance only. Okay.
See no one come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion.
Second, Grignani.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance 2018.
No, wait, we need the
Oh,
whereas.
Sorry.
I'm with you, though. I like the pace. I like the pace that you're at.
Yep.
Very nice.
Sorry
Okay.
about that.
Double time. Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on the final reading and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution above.
Second, Grignani.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance 2018:14, an ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, Morris County, New Jersey, amending and supplementing Chapter 405, Vehicles and Traffic of the Code of Parsippany Troy Hills to prohibit parking along a section of Weebrow Road. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, on July 31st, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the July 24th, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept that ordinance 2018:14 be heard in the second and final reading by title only.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Public hearing 2018:14. Motion to open the public hearing for the ordinance 2018:14.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call. Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay, the floor is open to the public to speak on this ordinance only.
See no one come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
A motion made by Ms. Grignani. Who seconded it?
No,
McCarthy.
it's made by Mrs. McCarthy.
Oh, the motion was made by Ms. McCarthy.
Yes.
Second by Grignani.
Seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is closed.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and a hearing held thereon. Now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading, and that a notice of the final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance 2018:15, an ordinance of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, Morris County, New Jersey, amending Chapter 4, Administration of Government of the Code of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills related to the appointment of special law enforcement officers. Notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record, the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills on August 10th, 2018. This ordinance was introduced at the August 7th, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept that ordinance 2018:15 be heard in its second and final reading by title only.
Second Grignani.
Okay, motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion to open a public hearing on this ordinance.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Floor is open to the public to speak on this ordinance only.
See no one come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Just briefly, just for purposes of the public, the ordinance authorizes the appointment of 5 Class 3 special officers for purpose of school security.
Thank you.
Okay, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion.
Second.
Khaled, we're at roll call.
We're at roll call.
That would
And
help.
they're on second.
Who made the
Close
motion?
the
Who
public
seconded?
hearing.
Who made the motion? Do we know who made the motion?
I
don't
guess
know.
I made the motion. That's my
Second
ordinance.
Grignani.
All right, I'm sorry. I apologize. Okay, so motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and the hearing held thereon, now therefore be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading, and that a notice of final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the above resolution.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, second by
Grignani.
Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ordinance
No,
2018.
we have to have a public hearing, don't we?
I'm sorry?
We already
Yeah.
did that.
Okay. I'm sorry. I have a question on that. I know we spoke about the salary ranges and the raises are going to be given when, or have we already established when they're going to be given?
Last meeting, I asked, you said we're
I wasn't
working
here
on
for
it.
the last meeting. Yeah, we're working on it. As soon as this passes, then we're working on it to be September 1st, hopefully.
And that's when our township workers will be receiving their raises?
Hopefully.
Hopefully. So it still could be delayed a bit?
Well, it's a lot of work.
Okay.
All right, we have to do the
PA forms.
PA forms are still not completely signed.
Okay.
The calculation is, there's 2 for every single person because of the way we did the raises this
Okay.
year. So
All right.
we're gearing up right now.
Good. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We're
Thank
working
you.
for September 1st.
Thank you.
Ordinance 2018:16, an ordinance establishing the white-collar salary ranges. The notice for the ordinance above was published in the Daily Record for the official newspaper of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills on August 10th, 2018. The ordinance was introduced at the August 7th, 2018 agenda meeting. Motion to accept the ordinance 2018:16 be heard in its second and final reading.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes. Public hearing?
Motion to open the public hearing for ordinance 2018:16.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay, the floor is open for anyone to speak on this ordinance only.
See no one come forward, entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by?
Grignani?
We'll do Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Okay, floor is closed.
Whereas the above ordinance was read in title on second reading and hearing held thereon, now for there be it resolved that said ordinance be passed on final reading and that the notice of the final passage of said ordinance be published in the newspaper according to law. Motion to approve the resolution?
Second, Grignani?
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, Ms. Peterson.
Resolution 2018-149, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills authorizing an amendment of the shared services agreement with the Parsippany Troy Hills Board of Education for the deployment of Class 3 special law enforcement officers. Motion to approve.
Second, Grignani?
Motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. Grignani. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ms. Grignani.
Resolution 2018-150, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills, County of Morris, State of New Jersey, allocating funds from the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund to Morris Habitat for Humanity and Community Options, Inc., and committing funds for Affordable Assistance Program and requesting court approval of all amended Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Fund spending plan. Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Ms. Grignani, seconded by Ms. Peterson. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Resolution 2018-151, resolution of the Township Council of the Township of Parsippany Troy Hills finding and declaring an emergency for the purpose of NJSA 40:69A-181 and authorizing the immediate enactment of ordinance 2018:15. I guess that's the end of it, huh?
Yeah.
Motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. DePiero, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Ms. McCarthy.
Consent agenda, be it resolved, all items listed with the asterisk are routine and non-controversial by the Township Council and will be approved by one motion, and there will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Motion made by Ms. McCarthy, seconded by Mr. DePiero. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, at this time, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Yes.
So, motion made by Ms. Peterson, seconded by Ms. McCarthy. Roll call, Mr. DePiero?
Yes.
Ms. Grignani?
Yes.
Ms. McCarthy?
Yes.
Ms. Peterson?
Yes.
Mr. Carriffy?
Yes.
Have a great night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.